Here's how to make a variable axis guiding curves operation. This is a multi-axis operation that can be used for 3, 4, or 5 axis motion. We will go ahead and create an operation, and we're going to go to our mill multi-axis type and select variable guiding curves. Here, we're going to go ahead and for this example, I'm going to select my 1/4 inch ball end mill. We'll say OK. And now we're in the variable guiding curves dialog box. In this example, we're going to cut these inside walls of this pocket. So what we're going to do on this first page is simply select our cut area here at the bottom underneath our tool. I'm going to cut these walls in this corner radius, so I'll select all of these, and then we'll say OK. You can notice that the walls are kind of flared out. They're all different draft angles, so this is going to be a 5-axis simultaneous toolpath. Once you have your cut area selected, you can then transfer to the Cutting Parameters tab. Here, we have some options. There's a lot of details in here that can be changed to use this toolpath. This, in my opinion, is the most powerful toolpath in all of NX. It gives you 100% control to make NX do essentially whatever you want it to do. Starting at the top, we'll choose our pattern type. I'm going to change this to be morphing. Morphing gives me a little bit more control than constant, but constant does work great. So for the example, we will choose morphing. Here, we're going to select our guide curves. I'm going to select the top of the walls, and I'm going to reverse that direction. That way I'm doing a climb cut motion. I'm then also going to add another set and select the bottom of the curves. This is going to allow us to have a from and towards curve. That way I can determine in a minute which direction I want to go and where I want to go from. I don't need that new one. So now we have our guide 1 and our guide 2 selected. They're both going the same direction, which is very important. Now we can get into some of the settings. I'm going to change my cut pattern to be helical because I just want the tool to go around and around. It's very possible that your machine might have a 5-axis head or a rotary axis that winds up and cannot infinitely spin 360 degrees. If that's the case, you might have to use zig or zigzag to kind of play within the travel limits of your machine. I don't have any restrictions on the machine this part's going in, so I'm going to use helical. My cut direction is going to be along my guides. My cut order, I'm going to go from guide 1. And I do not want any finish passes on this, so I'm just going to select none. Our step over, I'm going to use a constant step over of 1/8 of an inch. We'll consider this like a semi-finishing operation. Here's where this toolpath gets very cool. In the tool axis settings, you can choose parametric interpolate. When you choose this and you click this edit button here, it's going to pop up with your tool axis interpolation dialog box. Here you're going to specify the point and vector that you want the tool to be on at each point of the toolpath. So this is going to take a second, but I'm going to chain or select points and vectors along these chains here to tell the tool exactly how I want it to be as it's cutting. These vectors don't have to be super close to each other. They typically just need to be like a generic positioning, and then NX will kind of fill in the voids in between, or you can make as many of them as you want. I typically, in this instance, will go put a point in the middle of the wall, in the corner, in the middle of the wall, corner, middle of the wall, and so on around. That way, NX knows exactly how I want it to lean when it gets to the corners, but then how I want it to stand up in the straights. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my points and vectors here. To do so, you can just select a point on your line there or on a wall, and then you'll get your dynamic vector option. You can then just rotate the tool around until you get it to the angle that you want it to be on. So now I'm just going to kind of buzz around and do all of my points here. Select the point here. I'll select a point in the middle of this wall. This can be a little bit tedious, but by doing it this way, you have a lot of control to say how you want the tool to be, which is much more advantageous in a lot of instances than allowing the software to completely think for itself. Okay, so now you can see that I have my points all selected in the center and in the corners. And if you look at the tool in this corner, for example, you can see that I'm pretty much split evenly between that radius, and then I'm leaned away, so if you look at it from more of a top view, I'm leaned away from the walls and the floor. And if you need to make an adjustment, you can just scroll around and do whatever it is that you might need to do. So we'll say OK here. So now our tool axis is selected. Scrolling down, you can adjust your clearances like in most other tool paths. You could give this multiple depths if you chose. And then you can also trim and extend these tool paths. So we'll get to that in a second. But first, we're going to go ahead and say OK on our tool path now that our settings are done. And we're going to generate this. You're going to see this nice, clean tool path here. That just going to go around and around this pocket and give you a very clean simultaneous motion to finish or semi-finish this wall. So we can just replay this, and I'll just let you see the motion really quickly and how it just dips all around that pocket to cut it exactly how we want. A little bit of further explanation on the trim and extend settings. If we go back into the toolpath now, we can use these trim and extends here, the lateral first guide and lateral last guide. This is one of the main reasons why I choose the morphing option right here and do 2 guides. You get a lot of power with this trim and extend. So you can see that this toolpath, I selected the wall and the corner radius, and that's what it cut. Well, maybe I want to stay a little bit off the top of the wall, and maybe I want to push this a little bit past the radius. What I can do is go to my lateral first guide, which is my top, it's my first guide. I can turn that on, and then I can trim that down 1/4 of an inch. Then on my second guide, or my last guide, I can extend that maybe 1/4 of an inch. Now, if I come back up here, and I'm going to change this to about 50 just so you can see a little bit better detail. If I say OK, and we generate this, it's going to take a second. But you can see that it started down 1/4 inch from the top, and then it pushed the toolpath inward off of that corner radius. So by using these lateral trim and extends here, you can actually get a little bit higher functionality out of the toolpath and get rid of some scallops. Maybe you had a finish pass here on the floor and then you cut the wall, but you might have a little cusp. So if you go in there with this toolpath to clean it up, you can add a little extend and get rid of that cusp. So using these trims and extends can be very, very helpful in this toolpath as well. So that is how to make a variable axis guiding curves multi-axis toolpath.